In the early 2000s, a small village in India finally got a new highway. It connected them to a booming city nearby. New road, faster travel, and more trade. Within a year, 3 families in that village became millionaires. But the rest? They got cheaper mobile phones and smoother rides, but not much else. Today, those same 3 families own most of the land, the shops, and even the transportation business. But everyone else still works for them. Technically, everyone benefited, but the gap between them exploded. So the question is, was that a problem? And if so, what exactly makes this a problem? This video isn't about ranting against billionaires. No, we're not going to redistribute anyone's yacht. Instead, we're going to talk about inequality in a different way. Why it happens, when it's actually helpful to some extent, and at what point it turns into a threat to competition, to opportunity, and even to capitalism itself. We will also clear up something that confuses a lot of people: equality versus fairness. Because giving everyone the same thing doesn't mean that everyone's getting a fair chance. I've studied business administration and traveled to over 120 countries, and I've seen places where inequality helps people rise and places where it crushes any chances of moving up. The truth is, inequality isn't always the enemy, but ignoring everything that comes with it, that definitely is. So let's dive in. When people hear inequality, they usually think of a chart. Some people earn more, others earn less. And that feels unfair, right? But here's the thing. Difference is not the same as injustice. Equality means giving everyone the same thing. And fairness is always a little bit different, but it could mean something like giving everyone the same thing to succeed. Think of 2 people. One is really tall, like 6'7", over 2 meters, and the other one is 5'2", or like 160 centimeters. Now you let both of them ride the same bicycle. That's equal, but it's not fair. One of them is going to ride comfortably, but the other one is going to suffer every uphill. Take schools. In Finland, for example, children from struggling families get extra help. More teachers, more time, more support. That's not equal, but many would argue it's fair. And the result is that the gap is closing over time. Less inequality and better society. Now compare that to the US, where schools are funded by local property taxes. Wealthier neighborhoods get great schools and poorer ones don't. The funding is equal, but the outcomes are totally unequal. And this is where we have to start. Inequality of outcomes isn't always a sign of failure. But fairness means looking at people's starting points. And if we ignore that, we miss the whole picture. It might sound strange, but a world without inequality would be a nightmare. Why? Because people want different things. Some want to build companies, others want quiet lives with family. Some take big risks and live frugally to save. And again, others value free time and community more than money. And that is okay. Now add one more thing. Progress. Big innovations like semiconductors, green energy, space travel, they don't come cheap. They need huge investments, and that capital usually comes from wealthy people who have built up wealth over time. Imagine if Elon Musk had to split his earnings with everyone every year. No Tesla, no SpaceX, same with many startups in India or solar tech in Germany. You need capital to build big things, and inequality driven by effort and risk can provide that fuel. It also reflects different life strategies. Some people save and invest for decades. Others spend more on living in the moment. And that's not a failure of the system, that's freedom. So before we call inequality a problem, we need to ask, where does it come from? If it's effort, patience, or risk, it might actually be a sign that the system is working. But if it comes from barriers and unfair advantages, that's a different story. The problem isn't that rich people exist. The problem is when millions have no chance to escape poverty, and that poverty gets passed on like a family tradition. In the US and India, people often point out how much the top 1% owns. But the deeper issue isn't just how rich the rich are, it's how poorly the poorest are supported. And it gets worse elsewhere. In countries like Syria, Cuba, or parts of sub-Saharan Africa, you often find small elite, like business insiders or political families, owning everything, and the rest of the population lives with failing schools, bad hospitals, and little hope of change. So how can we spot that inequality is getting dangerous? Well, there are a few key indicators. Number 1, zero social mobility, where your zip code decides your future. And there are no safety nets. Basic things like healthcare, housing, or education are out of reach. A monopoly of power. A small elite owns the media, fund the elections, and write the laws. And a collapse of trust. People stop believing in the system. When these things happen, people check out. They stop trying, or worse, they go looking for someone to blame. And that's exactly how you get instability. Extreme inequality doesn't just block wealth, it kills hope. And when people lose hope, the system begins to rot from the inside out. Incentives drive progress. That's the idea behind capitalism. You work, you provide value, and you get rewarded. But what if that reward becomes a fortress? What if people stop building and start just protecting? Then inequality turns into something toxic. If you want to go deeper into this topic, I actually made a video about how incentives shape behavior. It connects perfectly with this one, and I'll link it to you at the end of this video. So think of a tech company that made a fantastic product. It's a great success, but then they stop innovating. Instead, they use their earned money to lobby governments and kill competition. At that point, their wealth isn't an incentive anymore. It's a shield. In the US, industries like pharmaceuticals, energy, and finance spend billions of dollars on lobbying. And lobbying itself isn't inherently bad. Everyone needs a voice in the parliament. But if it's used not to improve, but just to protect their turf, then it becomes a problem. Compare that to places like the Nordics or Germany, where rules make it really hard to buy influence. And that keeps competition alive. So if wealth becomes a wall that others can't climb, capitalism stops being about effort and providing value and starts being about entrenchment. And that's when the system betrays itself. So how do you practically know that the system is breaking down? Because there is no factual perfect number, but there are clear warning signs. Number one, no upward mobility. People stay poor no matter how hard they work. Number two, the middle class disappears. Homes, savings, and healthcare are totally out of reach for everyone. Weak demand. Most people can't afford more than essentials. Loss of trust. Institutions stop working for the average person. And rising anger. Protests, polarization, or populist leaders gain power. I mean, we've seen this movie before. Venezuela, where inflation wiped out the middle class completely. Pre-revolution France, where nobility lived in luxury while peasants starved. And post-Civil War Syria, where corruption and poverty became the norm. When the system only works for a few, people stop believing in it. And that's when it breaks. So don't look at how rich the richest are. Look at whether the system still provides real opportunity. And if it doesn't, the problem is not inequality, it's that the ladder is broken. So what's the goal? A society with no rich people? Of course not. We don't need equal outcomes, but we do need equal chances. Everyone should have a fair shot, regardless of where they start. So some things that could have a chance of helping the society are great early education for every child, or affordable basic healthcare, fair and simple tax systems, strong rules against monopolies, and support for small businesses and entrepreneurs. Canada, the Netherlands, even parts of Eastern Europe, these places show that it's possible. People can get rich, but others aren't completely left behind. So inequality is only a problem when it becomes a barrier. As long as people can move up, it's just a result of freedom and choice. But when only a few can climb while the rest are stuck at the bottom, then we're not talking about freedom anymore. So is inequality a problem? Not always, at least not inherently. Usually it reflects ambition, risk, long-term planning, and that's a good thing. But when inequality gets so wide that people lose hope, when it blocks opportunity and crushes competition, that's when it becomes everyone's problem. So the real question isn't how big the gap is, it's whether the ladder still works for people to move up. If the poor still believe they can rise when they actually try, then the system is doing its job. But if they've given up, then it's time to fix it. And if you're curious about how incentives shape all of this, from ambition to avoidance, then check out my video on that topic next. It adds a whole new layer to this topic. So thank you very much for watching. Stay thoughtful, stay curious, and I hope to see you in the next video.